Good afternoon, everybody. First, just let me apologize for getting started a bit late. We will not be making a habit of that. I hope this doesn't set the tone for the rest of session, but I will endeavor to start on time every day. So again, my apologies for being a little bit late. Welcome to the 82nd session of the Nevada Legislature. I'm Senator Harris, and I will be chairing the committee for the second time. I have the pleasure of being joined by my seasoned vice chair, Senator Pat Spearman, as well as our newest colleague, Senator Julie Pizzina, and new to this committee, but not new to the body, Senator Ira Hansen. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Senator Hammond, Senator Hansen, here. Senator Pizzina, here. Senator Spearman,
here.
Chair Harris.
Here, and please mark Senator Hammond present when he chooses to arrive. All right, so we will keep it nice and informal today. There are a couple of members, as I mentioned, who are new to this committee, and so I thought it might be beneficial to have some introductory presentations, especially from the departments, which we, I don't want to say oversee, but where we may have legislation pertaining to them. Before we do that, we need to adopt the committee rules. Committee members, does anyone have any questions on the committee rules before we put it on the floor for a motion? Okay, I don't hear any. I'll just give a general sense. These rules are pretty much similar to what we had last session. I added a little bit about decorum between members and witnesses, witnesses and members amongst each other. Let's just all remember to be respectful and act as if our mothers would want us to, and I think we'll be okay here. With that, I will take a motion to approve the committee rules. Okay, we've got a motion from Senator Spearman. Do I have a second? Second from Senator Pizzina. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Rules are adopted unanimously with those members present, and we will move swiftly into the next item on our agenda, and that is a presentation of the committee brief by our lovely policy analyst, Kristen Rossiter.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Harris, Vice Chair Spearman, and members of the committee. Good afternoon. For the record, Kristen Rossiter, Committee Policy Analyst with the Legislative Council Bureau. As nonpartisan legislative staff, we're here to serve the committee, but we do not advocate in favor or in opposition of any issue or proposed legislation. The committee brief is available online and summarizes the range of topics that may come before the committee. It provides each member with useful historical information, as well as contact information for agencies and organizations in the state concerned with energy and renewable energy, broadband and telecommunication, transportation and related infrastructure, and issues related to drivers and motor vehicles, among others. As of today, this committee has been referred a total of 12 bills, and the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure has been referred a total of 7 bills. However, additional measures will be referred to our committee as this session progresses. For comparison, in the 2021 legislative session, a total of 59 bills were referred to the committee. Thank you, Chair Harris.
Members, are there any questions? Okay, thank you for that overview. And we will slide right on next to our first presentation. We are very lucky to have the National Conference of State Legislatures here with us to present on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I figured since the federal government was throwing so much money at us, we might as well learn a little bit about what that legislation says we can and cannot do with it. I believe we are joined by Miss Susan Frederick, as well as Kristen Hildreth, of NCSL. And I will turn it over to you all to start when you are ready. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chair Harris, and to Vice Chair Spearman as well for having NCSL join you as you kick off your 2023 legislative session. The National Conference of State Legislatures, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, is the nation's largest bipartisan organization representing the legislatures of the nation's states, territories, and commonwealths. And as mentioned, my name is Susan Frederick. I am NCSL's Senior Federal Affairs Counsel, and I am the director of our Law and Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee, as well as our Cybersecurity Task Force. I work in NCSL's State Federal Relations Office in Washington, D.C. And I'm joined here today by my colleague, Kristen Hildreth, who is our Senior Legislative Director for Natural Resources and Infrastructure. We're incredibly pleased to be here before you today and to share an overview and update of the investments headed to Nevada as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's a huge piece of legislation. We're going to focus on these 6 categories that you see here, which are the core categories contained in the legislation. It is a $1.2 trillion investment in the nation's infrastructure. And while the package included $650 billion in transportation reauthorization, it also included an estimated $550 billion in new infrastructure investment and spending over the next 5 years. Today, we're going to provide an update on these core areas, and we're going to take a look at, since the bill was enacted a year ago, states are hard at work completing the necessary tasks and appropriating the necessary matching dollars to ensure that they can have the access they need to these programs as federal funds roll out. Funding update for Nevada. According to the Federal Funds for Information for States, allocation estimates total $4.25 billion. Most of these programs within the IIJA will need to be matched by non-federal resources. Your DOT will be responsible for a significant portion of the anticipated funding. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kristen, to go into more detail on some of the specific funds available to you all.
Thank you, Susan. Apologies, I lost the unmute key. So thank you both for having us with you today, joining the state of Nevada. And thank you, Susan, for that introduction. I'm Kristen Hildreth with the National Conference of State Legislatures. So before we delve into things, I think it's a little important to set a baseline and provide a bit of background on existing federal funding for surface transportation. And I'm going to try to run through this really quickly as we are time limited. The federal government generally attempts to pass a multi-year transportation authorization that cover really a gamut of transportation modes, so surface, water, and aviation, with the surface package that includes roads, transit, and rail really being significantly larger than those other two. The authorizations are then provided appropriations on an annual basis for surface transportation in particular. Congress last passed a 5-year authorization in 2015, which many of you will know as the FAST Act or the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. In 2020, Congress extended it for another year when they were unable to reach agreement on its reauthorization. And where does that all kind of fit into IIJA? As Susan mentioned, it's a $1.2 trillion package. $550 billion of that is that surface transportation authorization. So the majority of the funding that we see within the IIJA is going to be provided through existing programs and existing formulas to states, at least for the transportation sector. With my caveat there being that a lot of the new transportation funding that we see is provided via competitive programs. So states are going to be eligible for most of that funding, but it will be competitive. States do need to apply for it. And they are competing in a lot of instances with nonprofit entities, local governments, et cetera. So with that, the Federal Aid Highway Program is made up primarily of a few core programs that provide funding to states. I have a couple of them listed on the screen. For those of you with copies of the presentation, those are hyperlinks. You can click on them and get more information from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Each program, though, has a slightly different goal, although there is some overlap between the programs, and states are able to transfer a small amount of funds from one to the other. The federal government just announced, I shouldn't say just announced the apportionment of the FY 2022 funds in December of 2021, so just a month after we saw the bill passed. And in October of this year, we saw the apportionment of the FY 2023 funds. So it's one area in which we're really starting to see funds roll out to states fairly quickly. Just to note in this area in particular, on formula funding alone, Nevada is expected to receive around $2.5 billion for federal aid highway apportion programs over the FY 2022 to FY 2026 period. In addition to the funding I just mentioned, we also see around $26 billion available nationally via additional funding for new programs, including the PROTECT program, or if you like the full title, the Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. It's a new formula program that's expected to provide around $65 million to your state for infrastructure resilience improvement projects to address the vulnerability of the effects of extreme weather and other natural disasters. You're going to be able to use that funding for highway, transit, and port projects. In addition to those formula funds, there's also just around 1.5 billion, just under 1.5 billion for competitive program grants under the PROTECT program. State and local governments are eligible to apply for those, and that funding could be used for eligible highway, transit, passenger rail, and other port projects. I also have listed here is the carbon reduction program. It's another new formula program. Nevada is eligible to receive around $57 million for projects to reduce transportation emissions. Some eligible projects there could include traffic management, public transportation, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, congestion management technologies, alternative fuel vehicle deployment projects that includes charging infrastructure, which could be used in conjunction with the funding I'll talk about in just a second, among several other uses. You click on those links, you'll be able to find them, or if you connect with your Department of Transportation. As part of that carbon reduction program, the state does need to develop a carbon reduction strategy within 2 years and then keep updating it every 4. So I mentioned electric vehicles a little bit. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act includes a substantial amount of funding, both for electric vehicle infrastructure, as well as for the transition from traditional gasoline or diesel-powered vehicles to those that are electric and or low emitting. There's $7.5 billion total under this National Electric Vehicle Charging Program. $5 billion of it is via formula, and $2.5 billion of it will be via competitive grants, with really the intent of building a national network of electric chargers and to support charging in communities where people live, work, and shop. As of this fall, so September of this year, U.S. Department of Transportation approved electric vehicle infrastructure deployment plans and necessary plans that states had to develop to receive funding under this new program for all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico ahead of schedule, which in my opinion is really exciting that our communities across the nation were able to get those in ahead of time. And with this approval, all states now have access to that FY 2022 formula funding and the FY 2023 formula funding. Your state in particular is estimated to receive around $38 million under this program across those 5 years. So some really innovative uses for that funding. I'm also going to mention really quickly EPA, so the Environmental Protection Agency, has a Clean School Bus Rebate Program that was created under the IIJA to support the transition to electric buses. The state's Clark County School District was among the first to be awarded funding and actually received the maximum amount of $9.8 million to purchase 25 electric school buses and to install any necessary charging infrastructure that comes along with that. I think this in particular is really great to highlight because EPA received around 2,000 applications for this first round of funding. Those 2,000 applications totaled around $4 billion, so 4 times the amount of available funding. So it's really exciting to see that the state was awarded one of the highest amounts that EPA had to award this round. For public transit, the primary point I do want to leave you all with is that it is the largest investment in public transit we've seen, with 40 of the 90 billion being new funding and the investment itself being the largest ever that Congress has passed. Although it's really important for me to note here that much of the federal funding for transit does operate on a federal to local structure rather than a federal to state structure. So this is something your municipalities and your counties will be dealing with. In addition to that, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act contains a significant amount of funding for competitive transit grant programs. So that includes the capital investment grants for fixed guideway investment, including corridor-based bus rapid transit and bus facilities grants, which are available in addition to the state formula funding. According to the White House, as of, I think it was November of last year, so November 2022, based on formula funding alone, the state would expect to receive around 459, close to 460 million over 5 years within the package to improve public transportation options across the state. The funding on this slide you'll see is lists all the transportation funding per the federal funds information for states that Nevada is eligible to receive. So just to give you a better idea of what the state could be looking at over 5 years. And then according to the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, the state actually leveraged just over $500 million in new federal highway and bridge formula funds in FY 2022 to help jumpstart over 100 new improvement projects in communities across the state, really during that first year of implementation of IIJ. So that's really exciting. It's something big. A lot of states, again, are really taking action in this transportation space because it's one area that we're seeing that funding roll out really quickly. For some of the energy programs that were funded within the IIJA, we saw billions of dollars authorized in new funding opportunities and existing funding opportunities across a wide variety of areas in energy infrastructure. The law itself, I believe, sets up 60 new Department of Energy programs, including 16 new demonstration and 32 deployment programs. It expands funding for additional 12 existing research, development, demonstration, and deployment programs. Funding opportunities for energy include grid modernization, electric transmission, energy system resiliency, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, smart manufacturing, renewable energy technologies. The list is truly exhaustive. There's also a significant amount of funding for research and development and supply chain funding, with a lot of that coming via competitive grants for which states must apply. For some of those competitive grants, I'll just name 2 right now, maybe 3. Funds for research into carbon capture and storage was provided. 2.5 billion under the new carbon capture demonstration projects program. States and other eligible entities could apply for that to develop 6 integrated carbon capture, transport, and storage demonstration projects, which could be readily replicated and deployed at fossil energy power plants and other major sources of industrial CO2. There's a significant amount of funding to support the nuclear industry, including the preservation of the operation of existing nuclear plants, which are facing the prospect of early closure, demonstration of new advanced reactors, and exploring the ability of nuclear energy to produce hydrogen for other energy applications was also included. We also saw a significant amount of funding to support regional clean hydrogen hubs, which demonstrate production, processing, delivery, storage, and end use of hydrogen, which I believe Nevada's Governor's Office of Energy recently joined in on a regional bid for one of those clean hydrogen hubs led by the Southwest Clean Hydrogen Innovation Network. Trying to run through some of this pretty quickly, there's billions of dollars to head up a new program that's protecting outages and enhancing the resilience of the electric grid program. Of that $2.3 billion nationally, the state is eligible to receive just over $26 million over those 5 years for projects aimed at improving the resilience of the electric grid. So utility pole upkeep, removal of trees, undergrounding of power lines, or relocating and reconductoring of those lines, and other improvements to make the grid more resilient. We see $3.5 billion nationally for the Weatherization Assistance Program, which helps low-income residents with technical and other financial assistance to help reduce their energy bills by making their homes more energy efficient. The state is actually going to receive 21 million over those 5 years, and 24 million over those 5 years. And I'll highlight this as it's over double what the state has received since 2015. So that's really exciting. It's a substantial amount of funding for the state in this particular area. The state energy program saw a similar influx of funds. The state energy program itself provides funding and technical assistance to states broadly to enhance energy security, advance state-led energy initiatives, and maximize those benefits of decreasing energy waste. The state energy program in particular really emphasizes the state's role as a decision maker and administrator for program activities within the state that are tailored to your unique resources, delivery capacity, and energy goals. Your program activities are decided by the state and are really broad, but Nevada in particular has used the funding in the past for the state's electric highway initiative, its lower income solar energy program, and for some performance contracting in the state's public facilities. The Federal Funds Institute for the state does estimate around $4.5 million to the state from the IIJA bucket. Again, double what the state's seen since 2015. Just listing some of the funding totals here. One program I don't have listed, but is competitive for states, is the program Upgrading Our Electric Grid and Ensuring Reliability and Resiliency. It's funded at $5 billion over those 5 years. Like I mentioned, a competitive program which would provide federal financial assistance to states, tribes, and local governments to demonstrate any sort of innovative approaches to transmission, storage, and distribution infrastructure, and efforts to harden resilience and reliability. And with that, I'll hand things over to my colleague to discuss some of our broadband positions.
Thanks, Kristen. I want to talk to you a little bit about this very, very expansive program. President Biden's the IIJA appropriated $65 billion in funding to expand the high-speed internet access across the country. These grant programs will aim to make high-speed internet affordable for all, and they fund planning, infrastructure, and adoption efforts that promote digital equity and inclusion. The goal of the programs is to achieve this digital equity through improved access and intentional inclusive planning. So there are 4 federal agencies that are leading this effort to implement on the broadband side: the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, the Department of the Treasury, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. So NTIA is administering the bulk of the program, $48 billion to be exact. Through the $42.5 billion Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which we call the BEAD program. There's $2.75 billion for the Digital Equity Program and $2 billion for the Tribal Connectivity Technical Amendments Program. And the last bit is $1 billion for enabling middle mile broadband infrastructure. So let's turn to the BEAD program, $42.5 billion. It's charged with getting all Americans online by funding partnerships between states, communities, and stakeholders to build infrastructure where it's needed and increase the adoption of high-speed internet. The funding pool is also important in the DEA, which is the Digital Equity Program. The $2.75 billion here contains $60 million in formula funding for states to develop digital equity plans, $1.44 billion in formula funding to fund or to implement plans and promote digital inclusion, and $1.25 billion in competitive funding to implement digital equity and inclusion activities. Also critical is the Middle Mile Grant Program, which gives $1 billion to invest in the construction, improvement, or acquisition of middle mile infrastructure, which is the midsection of the infrastructure that carries large amounts of data at high speeds over long distances and connects the, quote, backbone of the internet infrastructure to that last mile or end user point. The FCC's first stab at the broadband maps, you may have heard about this. They were incomplete and accurate. They requested input from broadband providers, and other stakeholders. The second iteration of the maps was better, but not great even so. And so now they're going to produce a third iteration of these maps and they are requesting comments from states and localities by March 15th, with the caveat that even if you do submit a challenge to the maps after March 15th, the FCC is willing to accept them. Funding is scheduled to be allocated by the end of June 2023, so they are on a pretty tight schedule. I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen here to talk more about water funding.
Thank you, Susan. And I will run through this really quickly, as I know the committee does not super cover this, but it could be related to some of the energy infrastructure and the undergrounding of lines and transportation infrastructure that we're seeing. So there's 55 billion included within the IIJA for water and wastewater infrastructure. We saw 11.7 billion for both the drinking water and the clean water state revolving funds, in addition to 15 billion for lead service line replacement and 10 billion for addressing PFAS and other emerging contaminants. States have a really significant role in the state revolving fund process. So you all develop your intended use plans, project priority setting systems, solicit projects, make funding decisions based off of state priorities. You all manage the day-to-day operations of your SRF programs, really ensuring the long-term planning and financial health of the SRFs. So you have some clear roles in directing where this massive influx of funding will go. To note, there are no matching requirements for the 15 billion for lead service line replacement, nor are there any matching requirements for the 10 billion for PFAS and other contaminants. And I mention this because we've heard from a couple states now across the board that some of them are looking at combining the lead service line replacement projects with some other road, broadband, or other resiliency projects, as they're already digging up the road. What else can they do? So just to keep that in mind as your state works on their intended use plans and as you look towards other road, broadband, or resiliency projects, or even the undergrounding of lines. For those interested, here are the estimated funding totals for the state. Please keep in mind that a lot of these calculations we're providing here today are from the federal funds information for states. They're not official calculations, but they're estimates based on existing formulas, which in my opinion are really accurate. With the one caveat here being that there is another drinking water infrastructure needs survey that's going to alter some of that drinking water state revolving funds a bit, but not a huge much. They shouldn't change too significantly. Some of the other water provisions in the package are listed here as well. I do want to note that there's around just under $8.3 billion available for Western water infrastructure via the Bureau of Reclamation. That includes rural water projects, water recycling and reuse, dam safety, and Colorado River drought contingency plan projects, and more. The Bureau just released their FY 2023 spend plan. If anyone is interested, I'm happy to share that with you. We also see a $21 billion investment to clean up Superfund and brownfield sites, reclaim abandoned mineland, and cap orphan oil gas wells. EPA and the Department of Interior are well underway in getting this money to states. For brownfields in particular, we'll see around $1.5 billion distributed over 5 years for state and tribal assistance grants, which allow states to assess, clean up, and reuse any contaminated properties, which would be determined by the state's Department of Pollution. Most of that funding is going to be provided via competitive grants, while the remainder of it is going to be allocated via categorical grants, of which all state cost share requirements are waived. So various counties, cities, and environmental cleanup coalitions are recently awarded $1.9 million in the state for 2022 to 2027 from EPA to fund brownfield assessment work. So that is relatively new and also fairly exciting for Nevada. We also saw a huge influx in funding for disaster mitigation and resiliency. The funding for the majority of the programs I have listed here is split over 5 years, with states having various lengths of time between each program to fully utilize the funding in the best possible ways to fit the unique needs of their communities. As I'm sure you all are aware, no two disasters are the same, so no two mitigation measures will be the same either. We saw FEMA's flood mitigation assistance program funding tripled. FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, which I do want to highlight, was funded at $1 billion. The program itself provides funding to states and local governments to strengthen the resilience of your critical infrastructure, and that can include your transportation, your energy, your water supply, and your communication infrastructure, supporting all the above as you undertake various hazard mitigation risks projects to reduce those risks that you may face from disasters and other natural hazards. There's also a new program here, the Safeguarding Tomorrow through Ongoing Risk Mitigation Act, or the STORM Act, as people are calling it, creating a new resilience revolving loan fund for infrastructure projects to protect against some of the catastrophic events and actions we're seeing as a result of wildfires, earthquakes, flooding, etc. There's a significant amount of funding for states and local governments to create those resilience revolving loan funds through that STORM RLF, and this will be modeled very similarly to the water revolving loan funds as well. With that, I'll hand things back over to Susan to discuss some of our cybersecurity provisions.
Thanks, Kristen. So we now have a program, brand new program, never been done before, the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program. And it is the first of its kind. It's a dedicated cybersecurity grant, and it goes to both states and localities. And as you can see on the slide, it's $1 billion over 4 years. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, is the subject matter expert, while FEMA provides grant administration support and oversight, which means that CISA, which is the agency within, the sub-agency within DHS that does all things cybersecurity, will approve all final state cyber plans and individual projects under those plans. So as I mentioned, it's $1 billion over 4 years. There is a state matching requirement for each year, and a submission of a state cybersecurity plan is required. For this first fiscal year, there is a 10% state match, which can be a hard match, which would mean cash, or a third-party in-kind or soft match. The state has to agree to make available non-federal funds to carry out the award in an amount not less than 10% of the total project cost. The federal share cannot exceed 90% of the total budget as submitted in the application and approved in the award. Federal funds cannot be matched with other federal funds, and the state administering agency will be the entity that applies for the grant. Localities will receive subawards through the state. One thing I want to point out are the prohibited uses of the money, which I want to highlight that you may not use any of this funding to pay for a ransomware attack or any non-cyber purpose. So the other piece I want to make sure you guys get is it may not supplant state and local or territorial funds. With respect to the amount that Nevada is going to get, for the 4 years, your total amount is $12.4 million. For FY22, you guys have already received 2.487. You did submit a cybersecurity plan and it was approved. The amount is based on population plus an allocation for rural areas within your state. So your Department of Emergency Management is going to be where your one-stop shopping is if you have any questions, and the Governor's Cybersecurity Task Force is another area where you would find information on the details of your cybersecurity plan, since DHS does not make those public. So moving on to kind of wrap things up, what are some next steps for legislatures now that you've got this massive piece of legislation passed and money is flowing to the states? We recommend a couple of things. Reviewing federal guidance for new and existing programs. Make sure you're following the protocols that you need to do to get the money and the funding into your state. Developing legislative priorities for state agencies to carry out, considering having agency hearings and associated oversight, really important to make sure that if the money is flowing to the executive branch, that it's being used in a manner that makes sense. Applying for specific grants and prioritizing certain projects, that would be an area where we would recommend you have those hearings and that oversight capability. Considering legislative approval for funds or executive branch agency actions. So you need to determine whether to provide matching or additional tax credits. Using NCSL staff, and this is my favorite, to connect with federal officials, intergovernmental offices, and establish relationships with the regional offices of key federal agencies, as they can provide technical assistance and direct you to the appropriate resources. Suggestions for engagement and collaboration. We recommend you utilize your infrastructure coordinator to ensure that your state's priorities are represented across the board. We recommend interagency collaboration. Some of this funding is cross-agency funding, or it may be used for projects that could be conducted simultaneously, or so we want to make sure that everyone that needs to be talking to each other is talking to each other and collaborating. And then interstate collaboration. Is there an area where Nevada could be working with its neighbors to ensure regional success? And of course, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them today. Here's a slide that shows some of the resources that we would be happy to provide for you, or that I think you can click on those links there and see the information there. And then our contact information and how to reach us, very important as you go forward. We're happy to be helpful in any way that we can. And with that, Madam Chair, I will conclude NCSL's presentation and happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Frederick, Ms. Hildreth, I wanted to thank you both for being here and providing that presentation. I am actually going to skip committee member questions for the moment. I believe everyone knows how to get in touch with NCSL if we have additional questions, and members, I would be happy to facilitate those questions and follow up if you all have any, okay? Just let me know. Thank you both so much. We are going to go ahead and move on to the presentation by Nevada's Governor's Office of Energy. I believe we have Ms. Froelich, Ms. Yoakum, and Ms. Wickham. Hello. Thank you all so much for being here. Go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for having us here today. My name is Denise Froelich. I am the Deputy Director for the Governor's Office of Energy, and I am joined here today by Robin Yoakum and Laura Wickham. And we're very pleased to present today a review of our agency's activities and areas of focus. To start, our mission is to ensure the wise development of Nevada's energy resources in harmony with local economic needs, and to position Nevada to lead the nation in renewable energy production, energy conservation, exportation of energy, and transportation electrification. Our authority can be found under NRS 701 and 701A, which directs the office to manage energy-related programs, facilitate cooperation between stakeholders, advise the governor on energy policy, and collaborate with local, regional, and federal partners to ensure a reliable and sustainable energy system. The agency's focus is primarily in 5 main areas, which are energy efficiency, renewable energy, energy assurance, transportation electrification, and transmission and markets. Through this presentation, we'll look more closely at those programs and some recent activities in each of those areas. So for our first bucket, GOE oversees a number of energy efficiency programs. For example, the HEROES program, which helps low-income Nevada seniors reduce energy costs by improving the energy efficiency, comfort, and safety of their homes. Then there are the International Energy Conservation Codes, which, pursuant to NRS 702.220, we adopt every 3 years. We most recently adopted in July 2021, and we're next scheduled to adopt in 2024. Moving on to the Performance Contracting Audit Assistance Program, performance contracting can be used by a government entity to accelerate cost savings and energy conservation measures. Our office provides technical assistance and funding for the financial grade audit that identifies guaranteed cost and energy savings for the project. For example, we issued payment in July 2022 to the City of Reno to install rooftop solar and battery storage and upgrade to energy-efficient LED parking lights. These upgrades are expected to reduce the city's electricity consumption by more than 200,000 kilowatt hours annually and reduce annual electrical spending by nearly $100,000. We also engage in the area of appliance standards, an example of which is in support of AB 383 from last session, which required new standards for energy efficiency on certain appliances sold in Nevada. In 2022, we held a workshop and a hearing to adopt regulations under this new statute. The agency also oversees several renewable energy programs, including notably the Renewable Energy Tax Abatements Program and the Lower Income Solar Energy Program. The RETA program awards partial sales and use tax and partial property tax abatements to eligible renewable energy facilities. The program attracts developers to produce utility-scale renewable energy in Nevada. We review applications, conduct public hearings, and review annual compliance reports after abatements have been granted. Last session, SB 448 amended NRS 701A, which governs the program, adding to statute that partial tax abatements may also be granted for renewable energy storage or operations that include a hybrid of generation and storage. We then codified those regulations in NAC 701A through a public workshop and hearing in 2022. Our other program of note, the LICEP program, is a joint effort between NV Energy and GOE that offers incentives for solar systems that serve lower income populations. To date, the program has achieved the maximum incentives as authorized by the PUCN. Recipients have included the Boys and Girls Club of Southern Nevada, Catholic Charities, food banks, veterans housing programs, and other organizations that provide services to low-income Nevadans. These investments have resulted in 4,266.26 kilowatts of new solar capacity. The agency is also tasked through NRS and federal requirements to plan and prepare for emergencies related to energy shortages. The passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also referred to as IIJA, has provided additional focus for our recent activities in this area. For example, IIJA requires states to establish a state energy security plan in order to receive additional formula funding. Our existing Energy Assurance and Emergency Operations Plan was updated and renamed to meet this requirement. IIJA also articulated required components of the plan and provided an additional $200,000 to update our plan for 2023 submission. We applied for and were awarded those funds. We anticipate an item on the March BOE agenda for a contractor to refine the plan and ensure that all DOE requirements are met. IIJA also provided additional energy assurance and transmission opportunities, including formula funding under Section 40101D for grid infrastructure. In August 2022, we held a public hearing regarding proposed program objectives, criteria, and metrics, and then we submitted our application in December 2022. Recent activity in the area of energy assurance also includes continued coordination with NDEM, NDA, and utility partners on planning and emergency action, including incidents like the Labor Day heat wave that occurred throughout the West. Relatedly, in the area of transmission and markets, recent work in these areas included support for the Regional Transmission Coordination Task Force as per NRS. In the area of transportation electrification, we continue to close out the remaining projects for the Nevada Electric Highway, which set the foundation for state investment in EV charging. We transitioned this portfolio to NDOT and now serve in a support role as NDOT leads the development and implementation of Nevada's state plan for EV infrastructure. To date, our agency has submitted applications for 3 IIJA funding opportunities, has been awarded 1, and is pending on the remaining 2. The first opportunity is through the State Energy Security Program. Per DOE, the purpose of these funds is to enhance energy security, advance state-led energy initiatives, increase energy affordability, and assist agencies in building capacity through additional personnel. We anticipate notice of award in mid to late spring of this year. And included in this amount is that $200,000 for the required changes to the State Energy Security Plan, which, as mentioned, we have applied for and received. And also discuss the third opportunity that we have applied for is the competitive funding for the grid infrastructure under Section 40101D. Per DOE, the purpose of these funds is to subgrant to eligible entities for projects that prevent outages and enhance reliability and resilience of the electrical grid. We anticipate notice of award in late spring of this year. We are also monitoring additional IIJA funding opportunities, such as those that you can see on the slide. Per DOE, the purpose of these funds are to address areas such as energy efficiency audits, upgrades and retrofits, reducing energy use and fossil fuel emission, supporting building energy codes, and infrastructure reliability. And in addition to that, we're also monitoring IRA funding opportunities. And while it's still early days for these opportunities, examples of areas that these funds are intended to address include energy efficiency rebates and retrofits, training, education, and certification costs for contractors, building energy codes, and potentially much more. In many ways, these are unprecedented times for the energy world. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for your time, and if you have any questions, we are available.
Thank you so much. Committee members, quickly, any questions? Senator Spearman.
Thank you. So my question really, in the previous presentation by NCSL, there's $8 billion there for hydrogen, but the only thing we ever talk about with respect to transportation is electrification. And I know that RTC down south has 3 hydrogen buses. So are there any plans to start integrating additional resources because we can't build a grid big enough to support all of this? So that's my question.
Thank you. Denise Froelich for the record. Thank you for the question. As we heard in the previous presentation, we did submit a concept paper for a hydrogen hub, which we are pending response from DOE on that. As far as any other additional future plans, we cannot comment at this time, but once our director starts, we will be able to provide more clarity.
And thank you for putting that on the record. The new director has conveniently set his start date until after this presentation, so be sure to give him the committee's best. Members, any other questions? Okay, none at this time. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it. Please come see us again. Thank you. All right. Okay, next we will move into our last presentation with the Public Utilities Commission. We are joined by the Executive Director, Stephanie Mullen, and the General Counsel, Mr. Garrett Weir. Welcome to the committee. Go ahead and start whenever you all are ready.
I'm a little rusty. Good afternoon, Chair Harris, members of the committee. Stephanie Mullen, Executive Director for the Public Utilities Commission. With me, Garrett Weir, our General Counsel. Today we're going to share a brief overview of the agency's operations and structure, including types of proceedings. The PUCN is a regulatory agency that ensures investor-owned utilities comply with laws enacted by the Nevada Legislature. The basic regulatory duties, powers, and scope of work are defined by the legislature and codified in statute. The PUCN regulates approximately 400 investor-owned utilities engaged in electric, natural gas, telecommunications, water and wastewater services, gas and electric master meter services, and mobile home parks, and some propane systems. The agency is also involved in monitoring gas pipeline safety, which includes monitoring the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of gas systems and underground excavation near subsurface installations. Additionally, the Rail Safety Division monitors 4 disciplines within the state. They are hazardous materials, operation practices, motive power and equipment, and tracks. The continuous involvement in the monitoring and oversight of these safety programs helps ensure a safe infrastructure for Nevadans. Now I'm going to move on to the organizational structure, which also plays a very important role in meeting requirements set forth by the agency. The 105 full-time employees are contained in 2 distinct parts within the agency. There's the commission and the regulatory operations staff. The commission is a quasi-judicial 3-person panel appointed by the governor in staggered 4-year terms. Our current commissioners, Chair Haley Williamson, Commissioner C.J. Manthe, and Commissioner Tammy Cordova preside over contested cases and make decisions regarding the operations of public utilities. The regulatory operations staff, often referred to as staff, is an independent division that investigates and audits utility operations and participates as a party in all proceedings before the commission. Careful attention is given to ensure the independence of staff, and the commission is prohibited from communicating with staff in any manner that undermines the due process rights of other parties. However, because the commission and staff are housed within the same state agency, they share certain administrative support for matters unrelated to the respective roles as decision maker and litigants in contested cases. And finally, I want to make a quick note on funding. It's important to know that the PUCN is funded through an annual regulatory assessment or mill assessment and does not compete for general funds programs or money. The mill assessment is an annual calculation that is made based on the revenues for utilities that operate within the state of Nevada. Using reported revenues from the utilities and the PUCN's anticipated expenditures, we're able to determine what the mill assessment rate needs to be set at in order to meet the needs of the agency and keep the agency within an optimum reserve range. And with that, I will pass it off to Garrett.
Hi, for the record, I'm Garrett Weir, General Counsel for the Public Utilities Commission. I'm going to walk you through the types of proceedings that the Commission holds and the various types of services that the Commission regulates. Ms. Mullen mentioned the quasi-judicial nature of the PUCN. It's an executive branch agency, but it performs a quasi-judicial function in presiding over contested cases. It also performs quasi-legislative functions in adopting regulations and setting rates. Most of the contested cases at the PUCN are applications submitted by utilities, the most prominent of which are rate cases and requests related to resource planning. Resource planning is a process through which the Commission determines future needs for utility service and approves a prudent course of action for ensuring that utilities will be prepared to satisfy those needs. In a rate case, the Commission determines the cost of providing safe, reliable service to customers and sets appropriate rates for the utility to recover those prudently and reasonably incurred costs. Other types of contested cases are customer complaints and proceedings in which the Commission investigates whether regulated entities should be subject to administrative penalties for misconduct. Rulemakings are where the Commission adopts regulations, generally following legislative sessions to implement legislation. The Commission also occasionally conducts rulemakings pursuant to its general authority to adopt regulations necessary to carry out its duties. The ability to file a petition with the PUCN provides an opportunity for people to request general relief in the form of advisory opinions or declaratory orders regarding matters within the Commission's jurisdiction. Finally, the Commission regularly conducts investigations to examine matters related to utility service. So for the electric sector, for electric service, the Commission primarily regulates 2 electric utilities in the state that provide regulated retail service. Those utilities are Nevada Power Company in the south and Sierra Pacific Power Company in the north, and they both do business under the name MV Energy. For the rural cooperative associations that provide electric service within the state, the Commission's regulatory jurisdiction is limited to their service territory boundaries. The policy reason for the Commission not having oversight of the terms and conditions of a co-op's electric service is that the co-op is ultimately accountable to its members. There's a political mechanism through which the leadership of a co-op can be unelected if members are unhappy with management decisions and the resulting service and pricing. In the electric sector, the PUCN regularly presides over cases involving rate making, integrated resource planning, and permitting. And as previously mentioned, there are many cases implementing numerous state policies and programs related to things like renewable energy development, energy efficiency, and consumer protection. These cases affect the prices that Nevadans pay for electricity, as well as the short and long-term planning obligations for utilities who serve Nevadans. The rates charged to customers of electric service consist of various components intended to recover particular costs. The largest component, which appears as electric consumption on your bill, includes fuel and purchased power costs and all other general costs of operating a utility not specifically collected by another rate. Other rate components recover costs associated with legislatively mandated programs related to renewable energy, energy efficiency, natural disaster protection, and low-income assistance. The rates set by the PUCN allow for recovery of only prudent and reasonably incurred costs, plus revenue sufficient to provide utilities with an opportunity for a reasonable return on capital investments. Notably, the PUCN does not allow NV Energy to earn a profit on fuel and purchase power costs, such as renewable energy power purchase agreements, or on operations and maintenance expenses, such as employee salaries. Finally, it's important for customers and policymakers to recognize that rate-making issues are generally zero-sum in nature. There are rarely win-win outcomes when parties are arguing about who should pay for costs that were incurred by a utility. Allocating fewer costs to one party will result in allocating greater costs to another. Inevitably, the losers in this process will be unhappy with the results, causing the PUCN to regularly draw the ire of nearly every industry and type of utility customer within the state. For parties who believe that a commission decision is inequitable or unlawful, there are processes in place to seek an appeal, first at the administrative agency level through reconsideration or rehearing of a matter, and subsequently through judicial review by the state's courts. Moving to natural gas service. The PUCN regulates two investor-owned natural gas utilities, Southwest Gas Corporation and Sierra Pacific Power Company, which, in addition to providing electric service throughout northern Nevada, offers gas service in the Reno area. For these utilities, the PUCN holds proceedings that set rates and implement legislative policies such as the promotion of energy conservation and the use of renewable natural gas. The PUCN also licenses alternative sellers of natural gas who provide service to large industrial and commercial users in the state. Finally, the PUCN oversees gas pipeline safety in partnership with the United States Department of Transportation Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA. As with electric utilities, natural gas utilities recover the cost of purchased fuel, that is the natural gas that they sell to customers, on just a dollar-for-dollar basis. They aren't allowed to mark up the cost of the natural gas that they sell. The return is on the investments that they've made in infrastructure to deliver the natural gas. Moving to water and wastewater service. In that sector, the PUCN's primary regulatory activities include ensuring the delivery of clean, safe, and reliable service to customers at reasonable rates. The PUCN monitors the quality of service, environmental compliance, and financial performance. The Commission fully regulates the rates, service quality, and service territories of 27 investor-owned water and wastewater utilities in the state, serving approximately 22,300 customers. Notably, the PUCN does not have jurisdiction over some of the largest providers of water and wastewater service in the state because the definition of public utility in the NRS excludes entities subject to regulation and control by any municipality, town, or village unless otherwise provided by law. For rail, as Executive Director Mullen mentioned, the Commission has personnel who regularly perform inspections and are specialized in areas of inspection that enforce federal regulations. Those disciplines include operations practice inspection, motive power and equipment, track inspection, and hazardous material inspection. For telecommunication, which is largely a deregulated utility service, the Commission does fully rate regulate certain small-scale providers within the state in rural areas. There are 10 of those. The rest of the Commission's 322 telecommunications providers are comprised of incumbent local exchange carriers and competitive suppliers. The Commission does not rate regulate those entities. It regulates programs that some of those entities are able to draw from federally and at the state level. For example, there are 30 eligible telecommunication carriers in the state which are able to access federal Lifeline program funding. 26 of those receive federal Lifeline support to provide discounted telecommunication services to low-income customers, including mobile service and broadband access. We also have 9 eligible telecommunication carriers receiving high-cost support in the state to subsidize the build-out to more rural areas where the cost of providing service is more expensive. Utility regulation continues to evolve with the development of new technologies and ambitious public policies to advance the safety and reliability of service, as well as conservation, environmental protection, and economic development. As a result, the PUCN's duties expand every year, and the issues before the Commission continue to grow in complexity. We're constantly addressing exciting, nuanced issues that affect all of Nevada's residents and visitors. As I mentioned, it's often difficult for the PUCN to arrive at outcomes that please everyone, but the people and processes at the agency are focused on achieving evidence-based decisions that equitably balance the interests of utilities and consumers. The PUCN embraces its changing role, which now includes facilitating innovation where appropriate, to advance the public interest. Increasingly, the Commission is faced with unprecedented proposals that require problem-solving and thoughtful consideration of costs, benefits, and risks to advance public policy while protecting ratepayers. With that, my portion of the presentation is concluded, and we're available to answer any questions.
All right, thank you both so much. Committee members, do we have any questions? Okay, well, I know Ms. Mullen and Mr. Weir fairly well, and I think I can say that they would be open to answering any questions if you have some later. If you need help finding them, come find me. Thank you both so much for being here. The committee really appreciate your time. Okay. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. I did not take the time to introduce the committee staff at the beginning of this meeting, and so I want to make sure I do that now. To my left is our policy analyst. We just heard from her a little earlier with her fantastic brief. Ms. Rossiter will be assisting me and the committee with background and research on bills and other issues. Our legal counsel this session is Jessica Dummer, also with the LCB. She'll be providing legal advice and working with the committee on amendments and other legal matters. Our committee manager, who also happens to be my legislative assistant, is the lovely Lena Idelson. Lena will be responsible for preparing the agendas, uploading exhibits, interfacing with the front desk and the Secretary of the Senate, and as my legislative assistant, keeping me on track. Our two committee secretaries are Miss Vicki Lind and Miss Paula Peters. They're there here to the left. They will be attending our meetings, preparing minutes, and assisting with a variety of tasks as they arise. I also want to go ahead and just thank IT and broadcast production staff. They are fantastic and keep this building moving. Let's see, members. I also wanted to give you all some time to make a few comments if you so choose. We'll start at the end. Senator Hansen?
Oh, not much to say. I've already known most of you out there. My 7th legislative session, first time on this committee though, so it's going to be very interesting and looking forward to working with you, Chairman.
Senator Pezzina?
This is my first legislative session, and I'm excited to be a member of this committee. I look forward to getting to know a lot of you out here. I work for an IBEW contractor in my day job, so I'm excited about serving on an energy committee. Thank you.
Vice Chair Spearman?
Hi, Senator Spearman here. I represent Senate District 1, which is wholly located in North Las Vegas, and this is second time on this committee, but I chaired the subcommittee on energy in 2017, and talking about energy is like saying, let's go to Disneyland for me.
All right, I think that'll do it. Oh, wait, Senator Hammond is here. Oh, okay. Senator Hammond?
Yep, I'd like taking a ride in Disneyland. Senator Hammond, and just grateful to be here in your committee. This is going to be great working with you and on these energy policies and many other things. Been here a long time. I think I know everybody. So if you have any questions, we'll talk offline. Thank you very much.
All right, and lastly, before we go, we're going to take some public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to say something? Okay. We're not videoed down to Grant Sawyer, is that correct?
Chair Harris, Kristen Rossiter for the record. No, today we are not. However, I do believe BPS has the opportunity to involve members of the public via telephone and to participate remotely. If I'm correct, the number is 669-900-6833, and enter the meeting ID 8988-023-4015.
And I believe that information is also included on the committee's agenda. BPS, do we have any lucky callers?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Okay, we will take it. With that, everyone, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks so much.